ministry that God has given us, and it's another thing to understand the system that needs to be in place from both God's perspective and from the standpoint of your impact. You know, and I want us to also know that ministry received, it says ministry that God has given you. It didn't say the ministry that you have planned. It is the one that God has given you. You know, so because some of us are taking heed to the ministry based on opportunities, based on needs, based on what we like, or based on what we see that is going on in the environment where we live. And I know that the moment we start talking about ministry, usually our mind will go to, you know, it will shift, you know, slightly to like apostle, the pastors, the deacons, and all those people that stand on the pulpit and minister to a crowd or a base. So ministry in the most basic form is any form of service or contribution that supports the revelation of Christ and glorifies God. So what makes the service or contribution a ministry is the motivation and the goal. The motivation and the goal. So you can have people doing religious activities. There are a lot of churches where you see a lot of religious activities. People are very, very busy. That is not ministry, because the motivation and the goal is not in alignment with the glorification of God and revelation of Christ. So I want us to identify, you know, look at how to identify your ministry. You can identify it because that is one big area. A lot of people do different things. How do we really know this is the ministry that God has called us to do? One way is by being of service in an already established structure. When you are of service, being serving in an already established structure, grace will then be identified as you do what is assigned to you. Several things might be assigned. It is only when you do those several things, and then grace will be identified in that particular area where God is calling you to do. So the place of service is a place of proving and testing your vessel of God. It's a place of preparation. In the real world, you call it apprenticeship. So our area of grace is that area of supernatural ease and flow. And when we say supernatural ease and flow, we want to be careful not to fall back in your comfort area or your area of convenience, rather than your area of grace. Your area of grace might not be your area of convenience. It might be the area that is most inconveniencing for you. And you know, if you miss that area of grace, it will be actually difficult to function in your peak in the ministry. So after we find that area of grace, we now fix ourselves to serve in that area. One thing I want us to also know is that the God that has called us to ministry, when God calls you to ministry, he will equip you with everything that you need to run that ministry. You know, there's a proverb in my language that says, you don't send somebody on an errand and then send the rain after the person. So God makes everything available for you in that ministry. So he equips you makes provision for your preparation, your training. He cannot cripple you. No, he cannot cripple you. He will take you to fulfillment. If we look at Ephesians 4:11, it says, it was he who gave gifts to people. He appointed some to be apostles, others to be prophets, others to be evangelists, others to be pastors and teachers. And based on this, he will know what preparation you need. And he will expose you to such areas for preparation. And we can also look at apostles speaking to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 14. He said, do not neglect the spiritual gift you received through the prophecy spoken over you when the elders of the church laid hands on you. So there will always be an indication of this is the area of my ministry. I want us to look at Luke 22:35. It said, then Jesus asked them, when I sent you out to preach the good news, and you did not have money, a traveler's bag, or an extra pair of sandals, he said, did you need anything? And they replied, they said, no, they did not. That was their reply. So that would tell us that God, when God sends you or puts you into a ministry, he's there to see you to fulfillment. So I want us to look at fulfilling the ministry. The starting point to fulfilling the ministry, I mean the God-given ministry, is to build your life first. Build your life first. Build your life first. And then establish, while you're building your life, you want to establish solid relationship with God. Because, when the enemy attacks, the enemy usually doesn't attack the ministry. The enemy attacks your life. The enemy attacks my life because they know that when they attack your life, your family, your marriage, your finances, then they are invariably attacking the ministry. Zechariah 13:17 says, it says, strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. It's also important that even in trying to fulfill the ministry, it's very important that we separate the two broad areas. One, the first area is the calling, God calling you, come. And the other stage is go. There's a big gap between these two areas. The coming stage and the going stage, the fulfilling. There are several ministries in the Bible that give us a reference point. But one ministry in the Bible that really fascinates me is the ministry of Moses. It's very fascinating to me. And if we look at Exodus 3, verse 10, it says, come now, therefore. Come, that is the come stage. Come now, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So here, I'm looking at two things in this scripture. The coming, God is asking him to come. What was the assignment to fulfill? To bring the people of Israel out of Egypt. Now, anybody that knows this story can imagine the time or even appreciate the time frame from the time of calling to the time that he actually brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. And I want to read verse 11 of the same Exodus chapter 3. He said, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? So Moses have asked a very important question right here. And a question that you and I should always ask. You will always know whom you are. That's the first step. You should know whom you are. If you don't know whom you are, going into ministry, there will be a lot of confusion. So Moses asked, who am I? He doesn't know. But I want you to also see that God is sending him to Pharaoh. Before the ministry, before going into that ministry, God is first of all sending him to Pharaoh. Right? He said, let's look at verse 12. And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign. So God is giving him the conviction. He said, this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God in this mountain. So there will be an understanding of whom you are. What is in you? What is your capacity? What is your capability? What do you need to develop? What do you need to do this work? And the challenges, because it's in the process of understanding whom you are, in the process of building that relationship with God, that you will begin to see the challenges, begin to develop yourself, your muscle, both your physical and spiritual muscle that you will need for that ministry. So we know that Moses' ministry to deliver the Israelites, but no, you need to go to Pharaoh first. And that encounter, the encounter that Moses had with Pharaoh, anybody that knows that story will know how many encounters that he had with Pharaoh. Most of them are not very pleasant. They are not very great experience, but that built him up so much. It gave him the opportunity to encounter the gods of Egypt in several dimensions. It gave him the uniqueness of the dimensions of different challenges. So he saw God. For each challenge, he was able to see God in a different dimension. For each challenge, he's able to see God in each dimension. The way he encountered God with different plagues is not the same way he encountered God when the Egyptians swallowed the snake. When the Egyptians replicated the snake. So as all these things were unfolding, Moses was building muscles and encountering God in a different dimension. So these encounters revealed one undeniable thing about ministry. I'm sure by the time Moses was going through all that, he knew that power is inevitable. He knew that you cannot fight the gods of Egypt empty-handed. He knew that power is an inevitable tool in running a ministry. And that is for you and I in any ministry that God have called us. As you're trying to encounter God, as you're trying to understand whom you are, as you're trying to build relationship with God, you are invariably trying to build power and to understand that, no, this is not something you can do by your own power. So we see that in all this, as you're trying to establish that relationship, your patience is tested. Your loyalty is tested. Your dedication is tested. Every area of your life is tested. And you begin to see what is your weakness? Because a lot of us don't even know our weakness. It's only when you are exposed to the Pharaoh that is in between your calling and the ministry, the fulfillment of your ministry. It is only then that you can begin to see the loopholes, begin to see the cracks that you need to seal up first before you go into ministry. So Moses was beginning to see all that. He saw more than any two. That's why his ministry is very something that I can read over and over and over without getting bored. So it's the level of your encounter with God that will determine what you can offer in that ministry. Right? If you don't know how to chase the devil and the devil comes into the ministry, what happens? There are some people that stay on the comfort zone. They just want to stay on the comfort zone and begin to keep saying that Jesus have died for us on the cross of Calvary. And that comfort zone is like the ultimate zone. But you know what? During the ministry, a devil can show up in a skirt with lipstick inside the church, or inside the place where you are sharing food to the poor or to the homeless. So I want us to know that the ministry we're talking about is not just standing on the pulpit, handing the microphone and addressing audience. So in each dimension of ministry that God has called you, you will likely expect to be tempted in those areas. Your loyalty will be tempted. Your patience will be tempted. Your muscles will be tempted. Your prayer life will be tempted. So, and as you encounter them, that is how you develop to really go into ministry. So this stage is one of the most challenging stage for everyone, for you and I. So it is a stage where you hear, have you had that experience? I know some people will disagree with this, when, especially at the end of the year, people give testimonies. I've given that testimony as well. Oh, every prayer point I have from January to December, they were all answered. I just want to testify that all my prayer points from January to December were answered. I want to tell you a truth that is very bitter. If you are being called to a particular ministry, most of the time your prayer points, some of your prayer points will stay there for years, and you begin to wonder, why is this prayer point there? God is answering everything, but this one is just there. It's not going. If you're called to a ministry, that testimony might not be your testimony, because there's a particular level of growth. There's a particular school, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 5, high school, university, that God will want to take you through that prayer point first. And until you graduate, then that prayer point will become an answered prayer. I have one in my prayer point. Every time I look at it, I just laugh. But now I'm beginning to thank God. I said, Father, thank you Thank you for what you're teaching me with this prayer point that is not answered every year. Thank you. So I begin to recount what I'm learning from that same prayer point that is not being answered year after year. I just pulled it out. Last year, it was there. I pulled it out this year. I ticked off everything that was answered. That same one was there. Praise the Lord. So we should be prepared. But like I said, the God that have sent you on the errand, he will not send the rain after you. The next thing is that we have to understand the jurisdiction of operation. Every ministry has a jurisdiction of operation. Do not run on people's lane. You run on your lane. It's when you run on people's lane that disqualification happens in real life and in ministry. And error comes because even in real life, you see a race, 100-meter race. Somebody, in the moment you run in somebody else's lane, there's an error right there immediately, automatic error. So your area of jurisdiction might not be the most popular area. It might not be the most desirable area. It might not be the most exotic area of ministry, but that is where God is waiting for you and I. I just want to look at the next one because of time. We want to then design the strategy for effective execution. You know, like I said, God will deal with you in the domain of your uniqueness. That is where God will deal with you, in the domain of your uniqueness. So trying to copy what somebody else is doing might not work. And you know, some people will take that uniqueness in the execution and start to teach it as a doctrine. We need to understand that your uniqueness is the way, is that piece, that puzzle where God connects with you. It might not be a doctrine for the next person. So we need to identify that. It will help us for effective execution. So the route to ministry can be likened to a farmer. A farmer plants different trees that have different maturities and different fruits. These trees, they don't mature in one day. Some of them takes 3 months, like the tomato we plant in Canada in summer. By winter, they've already produced and died. You cannot compare that to olive tree. So these farmers are always this waiting. They have to have a waiting period for planting. Between the planting and the reaping, there have to be that waiting period. And the farmer will be patient waiting. What does he do in those times of waiting? It's a great time for preparation. The farmer is preparing. What is he preparing? He's preparing the barn, he's preparing the storage, he's doing the development, he's doing the learning, he's preparing the storage facility. He's even trying to look for marketing strategy for his product and the crops. So these are all the things that he does at that stage. So we have to understand the kind of ministry we have in other countries might not be the kind of ministry that God has called us to do in Canada. What we are seeing as a slow growth in Canada, it might be God's incubation period, that God is trying to incubate something. You know, when Ruth found Boaz, when she connected to Boaz, in her mind, she's thinking, oh, finally, I found somebody to fill the emptiness. Finally, I found somebody to fill the love. Finally, I found somebody to be a redeemer to my late husband's estate. Little did she know that God has a bigger plan for the redeemer of the world through her lineage. So I want us to also know that patience is very important. And accountability. Accountability. We're serving the God of accountability. He will expect accountability from us. So for lack of time, I just want to read the lyrics of a particular song called New Wine. I can't sing it. My voice is not too good for this kind of song. It says, in the crushing, in the pressing, you are making a new wine. In the soil, I now surrender. You are breaking new grounds. It says, so I yield to you and to your careful hand. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. He said, make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. He said, where there is a new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom. The kingdom is here. I lay down my old flames to carry your new fire today. Praise the Lord. Let us bow our head and thank God for this great opportunity. Father, we thank you